Welcome to my channel. This is an indication of some of the things that I cover on a regular basis in my videos. If you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to do so, and don't forget to click the little bell so that you'll get notified of future videos. Please feel free to share my videos on your social media, and I hope you enjoy the video which follows. Well, hello everybody. It is the 25th of October. I'm starting to film this. Hopefully it's just going to be a short video and should be up by sometime on the 26th maybe. Just want to show you what's left of the gardens and what's happening in late October. What we're looking at here now is a wild grapevine, and it's growing on the side of my house. I propagated it from one elsewhere on my property, and it's been growing there for, oh, I don't know, 5 years or so, I guess, but an incredible amount of grapes on it this year. Hopefully you're able to pick those out in amongst the foliage. It's a slipskin type grape. They might look fairly large over there, you know, just without me able to put anything else in there to show you to compare the size to, but they're not very big. Oh, maybe a third of the size of like a Concord grape or whatever that you would buy in a shop. Lots of them. I don't do anything with them. There's no reason why you couldn't. I've eaten a few. There's a bit on the tart side. But you could certainly make grape jelly or jam or whatever out of them. But I grow them for the birds. So far the birds haven't tackled this bunch. They will eventually when all the leaves fall off or whatever. Maybe they wait for a frost to sweeten them. I don't know what triggers their interest in them, but eventually the birds will clean those in like 2 days. They'll be all gone. And I have that same vine growing on a trellis here next to the house. It's growing up the sides of the cabin, two trellises, or maybe even three on the cabin, I guess. And then the place where I got it and propagated it from, it grows near the roadside. I had it here on the house many years ago. I bought it. Bob Osborne at Cornhill Nurseries collected it along the St. John River somewhere here in the province and propagated it, and I think he still sells it. It's a very hardy grapevine. Anyway, I lost the one that was growing here on the house and thought, well, that's it. I've lost my wild grapevine. Years later, I discovered it growing up a pine tree out next to the highway on my property. So evidently the birds moved it on when they ate them and left the seeds below that tree. But I now have it growing in several places, and it's a great year for the grapes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Well, if you remember when I planted the Liberation tulips in this bed that used to be a lavender bed, there were several lupins that I planted seeds earlier this spring, and this one was threatening to bloom. Well, as you can see, it did. It bloomed. There's a bit of, I think, probably frost damage on some of the lower leaves there. I have had one frost, a light frost, really. I was wondering if it would ever get it, you know, if there'd be enough climate left here for it to bloom, and it has bloomed, and it is the color that it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be yellow. What you see in the background behind it is the fleece that I've been covering it over with at night. But we've only, as I said, we've only had the one frost. It went down, well, maybe 4 degrees or something a couple of times, but I didn't see any more frost on the ground. Seems to be that if it's windy, it can go down to 4 degrees and the frost doesn't settle, and it was windy both of those nights. If it's calm and it goes to 4 degrees, in low-lying areas we'll have frost. Well, the tulips, of course, are not up. I wouldn't expect them to be. But I have planted 40 crocus bulbs in that bed, a variety of larger crocus. I have those growing out at the roadside and always like them, and they even multiply. So I put 40 crocus bulbs in there. They will come up and bloom before the tulips get a chance to bloom in the spring. Well, this is in that same bed. Maybe 3 years ago, I planted Chinese lanterns, and I think I grew those from seed and planted them, and they've been struggling to get established. 4, 5, I think I see 6 individual plants. It spreads and is almost impossible to eradicate. I had it in another bed one other time and wanted to get rid of it, and it took several years of digging it up to get rid of it. Well, here, now that I want it, I'm having trouble getting it established, but finally it's got one lantern on it. You can take that plant and clip it off now and hang it upside down or whatever, and it will dry, and the lantern thing becomes a, like an everlasting flower type thing that you could use in arrangements, but I've only got one. I'm quite sure there were 1 or 2 others during the summer, and some kind of a thing, slugs or whatever, ate them, I guess, but I did get one anyway that turned orange. It's related to the Cape gooseberry, ground cherry, I guess that Cape gooseberry is also called. And actually, it's a little late now, but you can tear that open, and there is an edible berry inside of that as well. I've never done it, but according to what I've read, it also has an edible berry in it. Not a great year for my pumpkin sweet old heirloom apple tree. It's got a lot of apples on it, but I've seen it have probably 7 or 8 times as many apples on. It sort of does this on a every other year basis. This is its weaker year, and next year probably will be another very strong year for it. But they have sized up quite nicely, and I will be picking a lot of them. I want to can some applesauce, and I'd also like to make more apple butter. I made apple butter last year and really liked it. So a lot of apples on the ground under it. There are always some that fall on the ground, but many more this year than I've seen in the past, and because we have had 2 very heavy windstorms this fall, so it has knocked a lot of apples off, and some of those apples are being eaten by something. I should set up my trail camera again to see what is eating them. I thought they might be deer doing it last year, and I set it up and it was a porcupine, so it's probably the same porcupine eating apples, but I think I might bring the camera out and set it up just in case I get something nice like a deer there. Well, I've kept this squash plant covered with fleece as well, and it's supposed to be a miniature blue Hubbard. The squash is sort of got a yellowish tinge to it, but it is turning sort of a bluish green. I don't know. I'll leave it on the plant as long as the plant is still alive, and then I'll take it off and probably bring it in the house and see if it will continue to ripen. I'd really like to try one to see if I like them or not. I'm going to have to try all my squash plants that I grew. Have to do those again next year. I didn't get much luck out of them this year, but I hope springs eternal in the heart of a gardener, I guess, right? No, my problem was I thought the ground was fertile enough. I'm trying to do the Ruth Stout method, where you just keep adding more straw, in my case, and the decomposing straw down below composts and fertilizes the garden. But I think you have to, especially in this climate here where we have 6 months of winter, you have to wait several years before there's enough fertility there to not use any other kind of fertilizer or compost or whatever. So knowing that, I will start with the Miracle Grow much earlier next year and hopefully have a better crop of squash. I've picked all of the other squash, and I'll show those to you now. I guess she wanted to be in the picture, so there's Angel. She's photobombed us this morning. Always follows me around wherever I go. Very patient, just sits and waits for me to finish talking to this machine. Well, I managed to get these 3 very small lower Salmon River squash, and they are sort of starting to go from their yellow to an orange stage that they're supposed to be when they're ripe. And next to them is a seed head off of one of the sunflowers. That particular one got blown down in our last windstorm, so I don't think the seeds have ripened. It's been sitting there for a week, and the birds haven't bothered it. So, moving on here a bit, let's see what we can show you. These are the things that were supposed to be spaghetti squash. I thought they were going to all turn orange, but they're still very green. There's one there that is more on the orange side. or is trying to anyway. And then the only one that I got that I think is really a spaghetti squash is the guy on the end. Looking forward to having that because I do like the spaghetti squash very much. And even if these other things don't turn orange, I'm going to cut one open and see what I think of what's inside. If it isn't a spaghetti squash or a version of a spaghetti squash, it will probably get fed to the hens. If they turned orange and ripened, I would have cooked even if it's some kind of a pumpkin, I would have cooked it. Because as I've said before, Angel gets pumpkin with both of her meals every day. But they don't seem to be wanting to ripen. Well, this is my hazel trees, one large one and two smaller ones growing in sort of a triangular shaped clump here. And earlier I said I thought that squirrels or something were getting most of the hazelnuts. But now that some of the leaves are falling off, I'm finding more of them. And I've also picked some off the ground where in the windstorms they got knocked off the ground. So quite possibly the squirrels have not identified it as a good food source. I wouldn't be surprised at all, as I've said in the past, that these are the only hazel trees here on Campobello Island. I don't know of anybody else that's growing them, and they don't naturally occur here, the wild ones or anything. So squirrels may not recognize the funny-looking thing as something that they'd like to eat. I hope that's right anyway. I'd like to find a few more. This is the same wild grapevine growing on the cabin. I don't know whether I said it grew in 2 or 3 locations. It grows in 2. I'll just show you this one. And here it has managed to get all the way up into the peak, and that seems to be where most of the grapes are. So luckily I'm not having to harvest them. But as I say, the birds will identify them soon as a food source, and it doesn't take them very long to clean them all up. Speaking of food sources for the birds, those are all tiny, tiny, tiny little rose hips. Thousands of them. This is that rose bush that I'm always showing when it's in bloom. One that I grew from a seed out of a rose hip and is now growing in Finland, I guess. The old gardener guy in Finland is growing some. I sent him some rose hips. Literally thousands and thousands of them on this plant. The birds don't seem to bother them until we've had some heavy frost, cold weather, and what that does must either sweetens them up or makes it easier for them to eat, but they also will be all consumed before next spring, and I found several locations here on my property where they are growing under trees that I didn't plant. The birds have planted them, and I have one that I grow on not a trellis, but I have attached to the south side of my house. I didn't plant that either. The birds planted it for me, and it had a lot of blossoms, and right now it's got a lot of rose hips on it for winter food. I just took the fleece off my fall pea patch. I'll put it back on as soon as I finished a little clip here. As you can see, hopefully there are white pea blossoms everywhere, and I will take you in another clip and show you that I actually have pea pods. Flat pea pods. Nothing has filled out in them yet. Hope springs eternal in the heart of the gardener. I'm hoping I can keep these covered up on cold nights and eventually get some peas out of it. Just been using fleece so far, but in a big tote thing in the hoop house. Quite sure I have 2 old blankets that I used to wrap the fig trees in before I gave up on the fig trees. So once it starts getting really cold at night, I may put those over the stakes here to try to keep them going. I have several of these in different locations. Some a little bigger than that. There's one there that's just starting. One good thing about peas, even though they've been covered, they are self-pollinating. You don't have to have pollinators around to pollinate your peas. I've grown them in the hoop house in very early spring when there was nothing flying around, and I didn't really do anything. Maybe I brushed up against them, moved them around a bit different times, but peas will self-pollinate. There they are, covered up once again, looking like some spooky Halloween decoration, I guess. But if I can show you down here, this is the row of parsnips, and there's a few carrots still left there. Still waiting for that heavy frost. Not that I'm disappointed that it hasn't happened yet. I want a couple of heavy frosts before I pull and store my parsnips for winter. Same with the beets. I'll show you the beets again in the hoop house right now. I'm going to store them both the same way. What I watched or read or something just recently, you can use either damp sand, some people I guess use peat moss, or wood shavings. And I always have wood shavings because I use it as a floor covering bedding in the chicken coops. So I'm going to put mine in layers of damp wood shavings. I have a tote, plastic tote that I don't use anymore. And I think I will do layers that are half beets and half parsnips, so you can use them on your way down through. Supposedly they will survive the long winter as long as they're in a nice cool place and the shavings are kept damp. So something I'm going to try, and I hope it works because, well, I guess beets will keep in the crisper in the refrigerator for a long time. I always have trouble with parsnips and carrots, though. They go sort of punky soft quite quickly. Well, this is my tallest sunflower here, just outside of the hoop house. I'm just ready to go in. And it is still alive. The leaves are still looking pretty good. So hopefully that particular head, the seeds are maturing enough that the birds will also get a chance to eat those a little later on. I'll try to remember to put on the screen the names of these varieties, hopefully, if I can find them. All I have out here now is the numbers. This is number 8. It is an Italian paste or sauce type tomato, an heirloom variety, and I do not like it. You see all those wonderful big green tomatoes and one or two there that are turning color. As soon as they ripen, they become sort of a spongy texture. I haven't tried making like sauce or anything out of them. Maybe they would be all right to use in a sauce. I'll be picking the green ones soon and taking them in the house to see if I can ripen them on windowsills or whatever. But I don't think I'd grow this variety again. It's very prolific, but I don't care for the tomato. This yellow variety has been incredible. One plant would have been more than I needed. I only have 2. Yeah, I guess I only have 2 plants in here, but wow, does it ever produce? And they're delicious. They're so sweet and nice. I had a vegetarian pizza for dinner last night, and they were lovely. This is variety number 6. Again, I will try to put the name on the screen. And it has produced very well. It's an indeterminate variety. It has grown right up to the top of the hoop house here, but it has been producing lovely, good-sized tomatoes. I'm growing a lot more tomatoes than I need. That's something I've got to remember next year, to only grow half as many plants. I don't know what to do with all the tomatoes. I only grew 2 Italian flat-leaf parsley plants. They are both enormous, and at least one of them, I guess, yes, that one too, both of them have got blossoms on them now, or embryos that are going to turn into blossoms. I suspect it's going to be too cold for them to produce seeds, but what I plan to do very soon now, I have a herb dehydrator. It's just a thing that hangs from the ceiling with 4 or 5 layers in it of netting and whatever, where you just spread them out and dry them. I want to dry some parsley for use this winter. The beet patch is continuing to do very well. I like the idea of planting them in clusters that I learned from Southpaw Davy. No decline so far in the leaves, so I guess the bulbs below are still continuing to grow. I do come in with a garden hose and keep this area wet 2 or 3 times a week. I'm going to pull a couple to take up to the house. I'll show you what they look like after I get them pulled. Well, I was able to do a small harvest while I was out here. I found what must be the last zucchini, I guess. One more out there the slugs have partially devoured. I'll leave that. Found some tomatoes. My beets, which aren't huge, but are they ever good. And I found 3 cucumbers, 2 of the European gherkins, and this is a Lisboa. The vines are gone. It doesn't take frost to kill a cucumber vine. It just does not like cold weather. So I guess that's the end of the cucumbers for another year. And that will wind up this little video. Thank you very much for watching.